Tell us, Mara, Elena said, her wineglass tilted in her hand, the rim catching the light like a blade. How's your little project going? The word project lingered, wrapped in mockery. Around the table, soft laughter followed, the kind that hurts more because it pretends not to. I looked down at my plate. The silver cutlery was too bright. The lamb was too perfect. And yet, all I could taste was iron. I heard you were freelancing, my father added, not looking up from his glass. That's very creative of you. Creative. It sounded like directionless. I smiled faintly. Something like that. Elena leaned back, eyes glinting. You always had that artsy streak, didn't you? While I was negotiating contracts, you were, what was it again? Building websites? Starting side ventures? She laughed softly, turning to her husband. She's always been the dreamer of the family. The word dreamer landed like a verdict. No one defended me. Not my mother, who adjusted her pearls to avoid meeting my eyes. Not my father, who tapped his glass twice to signal the waiter. The silence in between their laughter felt heavy, deliberate, the kind of silence that tells you exactly where you stand. I reached for my water, steadying my hand before they could see it tremble. I suppose someone has to dream, I said quietly. Elena smiled, that polished, effortless smile of someone born certain she'll never lose. Of course, dear. But just make sure it's something real this time. Not another phase. The table chuckled. Crystal clinked. A waiter refilled her glass before mine. It was the same dinner, the same pattern, every time. Her flaunting what she'd inherited, me pretending it didn't sting. But that night, something shifted, not outside, but within. I watched her laugh, her manicured fingers tapping her phone beneath the table, her ring catching the chandelier's light. For years, I had mistaken my silence for weakness. But in that moment, I realized it was something else entirely, a form of restraint. Because silence, when chosen, becomes its own kind of weapon. The meal ended the way it always did, with Elena's stories filling the air, and mine quietly erased by dessert. I helped my mother up, nodded politely, and excused myself before the brandy came out. In the hallway mirror, I caught my reflection, calm, still, unreadable. I looked nothing like defeat. That night, as I walked out into the cold air, the laughter echoing behind me, I understood something quietly certain. They'd laughed that night. None of them realized that would be the last time I sat at that table as the failure. Because the next time they saw me, everything they thought they knew about power, and me, would change forever. The morning light felt dishonest. Too soft. Too gentle. It drifted through my bedroom window as if nothing had happened the night before, as if their laughter hadn't scraped against me like broken glass. I sat on the edge of the bed with a cup of cold coffee, letting the silence settle. Not heavy, just honest. It was strange how humiliation never burned the same way in the morning. At night, it felt sharp, by dawn, it became something quieter, something that lived closer to the bone. Their words replayed in fragments. Little project. Dreamer. Phase. Each one small, almost harmless on its own. But together, they formed a chorus I'd heard my entire life. Elena had always known how to strike without raising her voice. Growing up, she never had to. She wore confidence like a second skin, the kind that families build around firstborns with high expectations and old money. She inherited the name, the position, the spotlight. And I inherited the comparisons. What no one ever noticed was that I never envied her spotlight. I only wished, once, that she'd stop using it to blind me. I walked into the kitchen, the floor cold beneath my feet. The house was still, the kind of quiet that makes you hear things you usually ignore. The hum of the refrigerator. The soft clink of the coffee mug when I set it down. My breathing. Steady. Controlled. Not the breathing of someone defeated. I replayed the moment she called me a dreamer, how her smile stretched just a little too wide, her voice dipped just a little too sweet. She wanted a reaction from me. She has always wanted a reaction from me. I didn't give her one. Not then. Not ever. That silence she mistook for surrender. I was beginning to understand it was something else. Something with edges. I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. My dashboard flickered to life, rows of numbers, client messages, quiet opportunities I'd built piece by piece while they weren't looking. The little project. My phase. My dreamer thing. I smiled, but it wasn't pride. It was recognition. For years, I'd worked in the background, building something that didn't need applause to grow. And for the first time, I saw the truth clearly. They had never feared my failure. They had feared what would happen if I ever stopped believing them. I leaned back, letting the quiet wrap around me. Somewhere in that silence, resolve began to take shape, slow, steady, unmistakable. Not revenge. Not yet. Just clarity. And clarity is where storms begin. They thought silence meant weakness. They thought indifference meant defeat. But they didn't understand me. Not really. Not yet. Because soon, they would learn what silence becomes when it finally decides to speak. The conference room was colder than I remembered. Not physically, the temperature was comfortable, but there was something in the air that made the walls feel sharper, the light harsher. I arrived early, as I always did. It was a habit they never noticed. The long glass table stretched out in front of me, polished to a mirror finish. I could see my reflection in it, calm, composed, unreadable. The kind of expression that, in this family, passed unnoticed. The door opened behind me. Elena walked in first, heels clicking like punctuation marks announcing her arrival. She wore authority effortlessly, the tailored suit, the practiced smile, the confident stride. She didn't even glance at me. Not out of malice, just assumption. That was worse. Being dismissed without thought. My father followed, his phone pressed to his ear, muttering something about quarterly projections. My mother drifted in last, already adjusting her bracelet as if appearance were part of the agenda. We took our seats. No greetings. No warmth. Just the rustle of papers and the quiet hum of the air conditioner. The family attorney cleared his throat. As requested, today's meeting will focus on the transition of operational authority. Operational authority. They said it like it had already been decided. Elena folded her hands neatly on the table, offering a rehearsed smile. I've already prepared a preliminary strategic plan for the next quarter. The team is excited for the direction I'm taking. My father nodded approvingly. My mother beamed. No one asked if I had a plan. I listened as they discussed projections, potential expansions, budget allocations, all spoken with the certainty that Elena would be the one overseeing them. My name floated only once, attached to a condescending suggestion, perhaps Mara can help with the creative elements of the upcoming campaign. Something low pressure. Low pressure. The word landed softly, but it left a bruise. I wrote nothing down. I didn't need to. The script was predictable, I had heard versions of it my entire life. At one point, Elena glanced at me with a smile that was almost sympathetic. As if she genuinely believed this was kindness. As if she thought she was sparing me from responsibility I wasn't built for. But the irony lingered like a shadow across the table. Because while they handed her the crown, none of them had ever bothered to ask who'd been quietly building the throne beneath it, brick by brick, detail by detail, without applause or recognition. I watched them finalize decisions that excluded me, watched Elena bask in approval she didn't have to earn. And through it all, I remained silent. Not defeated. Not resigned. Just waiting. Watching. Learning the angles of a game they had never imagined I could play. When the meeting finally ended, Elena stood with triumphant ease. My father congratulated her. My mother kissed her cheek. And I gathered my things slowly, as if the pace of my movements could hide the shift happening beneath my calm. They walked out assuming everything was settled. Assuming power only belonged to the one loud enough to claim it. They left the room so sure of the future. So certain of her place in it. They never once looked back to see the expression on my face. They didn't notice the steadiness in my eyes. Or the quiet certainty blooming in the space they'd mistaken for emptiness. They handed her the crown that day. They never asked who built the throne. I didn't go home after the meeting. My feet carried me somewhere quieter, a converted loft on the east side, tucked above a row of forgotten shops. From the outside, it looked like nothing. A faded red door. A cracked window. A place people walked past without remembering. That was precisely why I chose it. Power grows differently in silence. Inside, the space was warm, lit by the soft glow of amber lamps and the hum of old radiators. The walls were lined with white boards, pin notes, scribbled concepts, projected timelines. In the far corner, a single desk held 2 monitors, stacks of reports, and a small ceramic mug with a hairline crack running through it. My workspace. My real workspace. The one nobody in my family knew existed. I set my bag down and exhaled, the tension from the meeting dissolving as soon as the door clicked shut. Here, there was no hierarchy. No old money. No inherited power. Just work. Quiet, relentless work. On the wall hung a chart, a branching network of companies, vendors, clients, and emerging markets. The lines between them were drawn in different colors. Some trailed off into question marks. Others looped back into themselves. At the very center, one circle glowed under the lamp's reflection. Myra Collective. My little project, as Elena liked to call it. Except it wasn't little. Not anymore. The company had begun with a single idea, one she had once laughed at during a family brunch. I could still picture that moment, her fork clinking against her plate as she waved off the concept with a grin. "It's cute," she had said. "But it will never scale." I didn't argue. I never argued. I simply built it anyway. Quietly. Patiently. Brick by brick. Every rejection had become research. Every doubt had become direction. Every moment of humiliation at that dinner table had turned into fuel. And now, in this small loft with flickering lights and mismatched furniture, Myra was starting to grow teeth. Clients who wanted ethics over ego were signing with us. Suppliers trusted us. Investors, discreet ones, had begun asking for meetings. I reached for a tablet and reviewed the latest projections. The numbers weren't loud, but they were steady. They didn't scream success. They whispered inevitability. And that kind of success is harder to see coming. I sat down, letting the glow of the screen wash over me. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, not hesitant, but deliberate. I wasn't building a competitor. Not anymore. I was building an answer. A quiet one, but no less powerful for its softness. And somewhere deep down, beneath the work and the silence and the steady heartbeat of this small room, I felt something shift, something that had been dormant for years. Not anger. Not vengeance. Just certainty. A calm, unshakable certainty. The kind that only comes when you finally realize you're no longer behind. You're ahead. And they haven't noticed. Not yet. What they didn't know was that the quietest plans are often the ones already in motion, and mine was just beginning to take shape. News travels differently in my family's world. Loud victories are celebrated immediately, but fractures, the subtle kind, spread in whispers first, slipping through hallways and inboxes long before anyone notices the foundation shifting beneath them. I heard the first whisper on a Thursday morning. A former colleague forwarded me a thread, quiet speculation, a harmless question at first glance. Has anyone noticed Elena's numbers slipping? The message was buried inside a chain of unrelated updates, almost insignificant, but it carried the faint static of something beginning to unravel. I didn't react. I simply set my phone down and continued reviewing Myra's weekly metrics. Steady growth. Predictable uptick in inquiries. 3 potential partnerships waiting for my approval. The contrast was almost poetic. Later that afternoon, while reviewing supplier contracts with my operations manager, another message came through, this time from a vendor who'd recently declined Elena's proposal. He didn't know I was her sister. He just wanted to express appreciation for Myra's transparency. She rushed us, he wrote. Didn't bother to read the terms. Felt entitled, I guess. Entitled. It was a small word, but it carried the whole truth of her leadership. Still, I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I didn't even let myself enjoy it. Not because I lacked the desire. But because victory feels different when you've spent your whole life being told you'd never have one, quieter, heavier, almost solemn. 2 days later, I attended a local industry event. Elena was there too. She arrived surrounded by people, her laughter ringing like polished silver, her confidence still intact on the surface. But something had changed. Her eyes were sharper. Her smile flickered at the edges. A shadow beneath the brilliance. When she spotted me, her expression didn't falter, but her certainty did. Just for a split second. A microsecond only someone who'd known her all her life would catch. I approached the coffee table, keeping my posture neutral. A pair of analysts nearby whispered under their breath. They weren't talking about me. They were talking about her. Her proposals are getting sloppy. She's spreading herself thin. I think she expected everyone to fall in line. Elena didn't hear them. But I did. I always heard the things she never paid attention to. And as I stirred my coffee, I felt the familiar pull of old emotions, the ache of years of being underestimated, dismissed, erased. But something new threaded itself through that ache, a quiet, steady recognition that this time, the shift wasn't inside me. It was around her. She was losing ground she didn't even realize she'd stepped off of. Her confidence remained loud, but her influence, the real kind, was beginning to fade. And I hadn't lifted a single finger. I walked past her without stopping, watching as she laughed too loudly at a joke no one else found funny. The cracks were there. Not deep yet. But visible. Growing. One of us was getting smaller, even in the spotlight. And one of us was growing, quietly, in the shadows she never bothered to look into. The first real shift didn't arrive with fanfare. It came in an email, brief, polite, almost understated. But some messages carry weight far beyond their length. Effective immediately, we'd like to transfer our account to Myra Collective. No explanation. No drama. Just a clean break from Elena's firm. I stared at the screen for a moment, letting the reality settle. This wasn't one of the small clients, the ones who wouldn't cause ripples. This was a mid-tier partner with influence, someone Elena had bragged about securing during a holiday dinner 2 years ago. I remembered that dinner vividly. Her champagne toast. My father's applause. My mother's proud smile. The way Elena squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "Keep watching, little sister. This is how it's done." Now they were leaving her for me. Quietly. Decisively. I drafted a response with measured professionalism, no excitement, no triumph, just clarity and respect. That was the difference between us. I knew how to speak softly while still being heard. Later that week, I attended a brief contract signing meeting with the client. A small handshake, a few methodical signatures, a polite exchange of nods. It felt ordinary. Almost too ordinary for what it meant. But the truth of power is simple. It rarely announces itself. It just begins. When I stepped outside, the city air felt colder, sharper. I took a slow breath, watching the steam curl upward like a secret finally exhaled. Across the street, I saw Elena's company logo on the side of a transit bus, bold, glossy, expensive. A symbol of everything she'd been handed. And yet here I stood, gathering the pieces she was losing. Not because I took them. But because she let them slip. That afternoon, I received a message from her. A short one. No greeting. No warmth. Did you approach them? I typed back slowly. No. I paused, then added, they approached us. The typing dots appeared. Disappeared. Reappeared. Then vanished entirely. A minute later, a final message came through. Convenient. I stared at the word, feeling neither anger nor satisfaction, just clarity. Convenient wasn't the right word. Inevitable was. But I didn't say that. I set my phone down and returned to my work, the hum of the office settling into a rhythm that felt both steady and new. In the quiet of that moment, I could feel the shift fully, not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. The playing field wasn't leveling. It was tilting. Slowly, deliberately, in my direction. And Elena? She was only just beginning to notice. Luck, she called it. But luck has a strange way of repeating itself. Momentum has a sound to it, quiet at first, almost like a distant hum. I heard it in the growing rhythm of notifications on my phone, in the subtle rise of inquiries, in the tightening cadence of meetings that began filling my calendar without me forcing a single one. Clients were shifting. Some discreetly. Others boldly. But all of them moved with the same underlying reason. They were looking for something Elena no longer offered, steadiness wrapped in integrity. One evening, as the rain traced thin lines across my loft windows, my operations manager forwarded an industry newsletter. Myra Collective wasn't just mentioned. It was highlighted. A rising ethical contender. A quiet force with modern vision. The words didn't thrill me, not the way people might expect. Instead, they settled in my chest with the weight of something real, something earned. But storm clouds don't form on one side of the sky. They gather everywhere. That same night, a different message arrived. This one from a mutual contact, someone who floated between my world and Elena's. He rarely gossiped. So when he did, people listened. Just a heads up, she's losing her grip. Your name came up in her meetings today. I sat back slowly, letting the words trace their meaning through the quiet. Not fear. Not tension. Just inevitability. Elena's panic wasn't loud yet, she was too proud for that. But panic doesn't begin with shouting. It begins with questions asked too casually, requests sent too quickly, decisions made too sharply. 2 days later, I saw it with my own eyes. A networking panel. Neutral ground. We weren't scheduled to speak to each other, but proximity has a way of forcing truths. She spotted me across the room. At first, her expression didn't break. She laughed with the group around her, tossed her hair, adjusted her sleeve. But then one of her associates whispered something into her ear, something that made her posture stiffen. Her gaze snapped toward me. Not with anger. With recognition. The kind that only appears when someone realizes they've been ignoring the wrong threat. I held her stare calmly. Not challenging. Not smug. Just present. Her eyes narrowed, confusion stitched into the edges, she didn't understand how I'd gotten here. How I'd grown. Who was helping me? The truth was simpler than she ever imagined. I helped myself. Later that week, another client transitioned to Myra, a bigger one this time. The kind that sent small shockwaves through boardrooms. My phone buzzed again. A message from that same mutual contact. She's asking around about you. She's worried. Worried. A word she'd never associated with me before. The storm had stopped gathering. It had started moving. And it wasn't heading toward me. It was forming behind me, pushing me forward, lifting my sails, carrying me into a future she never thought I'd touch. Meanwhile, she remained rooted where she'd always stood, certain the wind would always blow in her favor. By the time she realized the direction had changed, the storm was already upon her, and I was the one quietly steering it. You said. The first time I saw real fear in Elena's eyes, it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a flicker, a break in her gaze so quick most people would have missed it. But I saw it. I'd spent a lifetime watching her. It happened in a private reception hall, where industry leaders sipped wine and pretended not to watch each other too closely. The lighting was low, warm, strategic, the kind meant to flatter faces and soften insecurities. Elena stood near the center of the room, wrapped in a navy silk dress, her posture tall and polished. From a distance, she looked exactly as she always had, composed, superior, untouchable. But when our eyes met, something inside her shifted, the smallest tightening around her mouth, the faintest hesitation in her breath. She walked toward me with steps too smooth to be natural. When someone has trained their entire life to appear unbothered, even the slightest tremor becomes glaring. "You," she said softly, stopping just a little too close. "We need to talk." I almost smiled. Not because of triumph, but because of the irony. All my life, she had spoken at me. Never to me. And never like this. We slipped into a quieter hallway, the sounds of the reception muffled behind the door. Her composure cracked the moment it shut. "Are you doing this?" she asked, voice low but trembling. "Are you actually trying to undermine me?" I met her stare with calm control. "You're assuming I have that kind of power." Her jaw clenched. "Clients are leaving. You don't just attract people like that. Someone is helping you. I built MYRA myself." She laughed once, short, sharp, brittle. "Don't be ridiculous. You don't have the experience, the connections, the—" I tilted my head. "The what?" The question cut through her like a scalpel. Because the end of that sentence, the truth she had meant to say, hovered in the air between us. "You don't have what I have." For the first time, she didn't say it aloud. Maybe because now it no longer sounded true. Her voice softened, desperation slipping through the cracks. "Why didn't you tell me you were trying to do this? Why hide it?" I let the silence settle for a moment, letting her feel its weight. "You never asked what I was doing," I said quietly. "You only assumed it didn't matter." Her lips parted, but no words came out. A slow realization washed over her, the kind that leaves a person unsteady. Understanding is always harsher when it arrives late. "You're taking clients," she whispered. "They're choosing us," I corrected gently. She stepped back, breath shaky. For a moment, she looked small, not in size, but in certainty. As if someone had quietly turned off the spotlight she'd lived under her entire life. In that dim hallway, I recognized something I'd never seen on her face before. Not anger. Not superiority. But fear. Not of losing clients, but of losing the version of the world where I stayed beneath her. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I simply watched, steady and silent, as she finally saw the truth. The balance had shifted. She could feel it now, in her pulse, in her breath, in the tremble of her hands she tried to hide. She wasn't dealing with the sister she'd underestimated for years. She was dealing with someone she had never bothered to know. The mask finally cracked, and through that fracture, she saw me clearly for the first time. Elena's downfall didn't happen in one dramatic burst. It came quietly at first, like threads loosening on a once immaculate dress. One tug here. One pull there. Until the seams she'd always taken for granted began to slip beneath her hands. It started internally. A manager resigned. Then another. Both departures phrased politely, but the subtext was unmistakable. They no longer believed she could lead. I heard about it through people who didn't even know we were related. They spoke in lowered voices, like discussing a storm forming far off the coast. "She's losing focus. Bad investments, rushed approvals. I don't know what's going on over there." I listened without reacting, my expression calm, my posture measured. I wasn't there to gloat. I was there to observe the consequences she'd carved for herself. When the board finally summoned her for an internal performance review, the industry felt the shift instantly. The whispers grew louder. Competitors circled discreetly. And Myra's inbox flooded with inquiries from people looking for stability. Not excitement. Not glamour. Just steadiness. The very thing she had always underestimated in me. Her company's quarterly report leaked next, not catastrophic, but undeniably weak. Enough to raise eyebrows. Enough to reach my phone before it reached her. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I had been the last to know anything in the family. Now I was the first. The final blow came on a gray morning, the sky the same color as the mood settling over the city. My mentor, the one who'd quietly guided my earliest business decisions, called to say a formal buyout proposal had landed on his desk. Not from me. From her board. They're desperate, he said softly. They want MYRA to acquire their assets. Discreetly, if possible. I leaned back in my chair, letting the words echo through the quiet of my office. A buyout. Of her company. By mine. Not once, in all her years of belittling me, had she considered this could be the end of our story. Not once had she imagined a world where she wasn't the one rescuing me, or watching me fall. I read through the preliminary documents that arrived moments later. They were clinical, concise, undeniably real. Numbers don't lie, even when people do. Her company wasn't sinking because of me. It was sinking because she believed she could steer a ship with charm alone. And now, the vessel she flaunted for years was drifting toward the only harbor left, the one I had built quietly, carefully, without applause. When the initial shock settled, something steadier rose in its place. Not triumph. Not vindication. Just a calm acknowledgement of balance restored. The next board meeting was scheduled for Friday. I was invited, not as a guest, but as a potential owner. That evening, as I left the office, the city lights blurred in the misty air, soft and unhurried. Pedestrians brushed past me, unaware that an empire had shifted beneath their feet. And somewhere across town, my sister sat in a boardroom she once ruled, unaware that the people around her were already discussing a future that no longer had her name on it. She built her world on my silence. Now silence was taking it back. The room was the same as before, the same glass walls, the same cold air, the same immaculate table where they once dismissed me without a second thought. But this time, the energy was different. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just, shifted. People looked up when I entered. Not with condescension. Not with polite disinterest. But with recognition. That alone felt like a quiet earthquake. At the far end of the table, Elena sat stiffly, her posture too perfect to be natural. She had always been radiant in boardrooms, confident, poised, sculpted by expectation. But today, her glow had dimmed. Her eyes darted, her breath shallow, as if she were trying to hold together a world already coming apart at the seams. She didn't speak when I approached. She didn't smirk. She didn't play the role she'd perfected all her life. She simply watched me, not as a sister, not as a rival, but as someone she no longer understood. The chair to my left was pulled out for me. I took my seat slowly, deliberately, feeling the subtle weight of all the eyes in the room. The board members shuffled papers, cleared throats, exchanged glances. A storm of decisions hovered in the silence above us. Finally, the chairman spoke. His tone was neutral, professional, but beneath it lay the unease of someone navigating unfamiliar terrain. As you all know, he began, the company is facing structural instability. After reviewing all available options, Myra Collective has been identified as the strongest potential partner. Possibly even the primary acquirer. The word acquirer didn't echo. It thudded. Heavy. I felt Elena flinch beside it. Her voice, when it finally emerged, was thin. This is premature. We haven't discussed alternative. The chairman cut her off with quiet precision. Elena, the numbers are clear. Numbers don't care about pride. Numbers don't soften their edges for dignity. I didn't look at her. Not yet. I kept my gaze steady on the documents in front of me, the valuation reports, the legal drafts, the assets listed like scattered puzzle pieces. And then, slowly, I lifted my eyes to her. Her face was pale, but her eyes were burning, not with anger, but with the desperate flicker of someone drowning in shallow water. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Not accusing. Not commanding. Just afraid. I answered softly. "Because the company deserves stability. And because you deserve honesty." Her breath hitched. She wasn't used to honesty from me. She was used to my silence. "You're enjoying this," she said, voice shaking. I shook my head. "No. I'm respecting the situation. Something you taught me never to expect." A brittle laugh escaped her, short and painful. "You want revenge. I want balance," I said calmly. The rest happened on its own. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was heavy. Full. The kind that shifts the air in a room, changes the temperature, settles into the bones of everyone present. When the vote began, no one hesitated. Not a single hand rose in her favor. Not one. Elena stared at the table, her fingers trembling slightly. She had always believed the room belonged to her. But now, as the final decision concluded, she understood. The room had simply tolerated her. Afterward, when the board members filed out, she remained seated. Frozen. Small. I stood to leave. But before I stepped away, she spoke, barely audible. "Mara, please." I paused. Not to revel in her vulnerability, but because there is a kind of pain you don't rush past, even when it comes from someone who once caused yours. I turned to her with quiet steadiness. "I'm not here to hurt you," I said. "I'm here to clean up what you refuse to see." Her lips parted, but no words came. The truth has a way of silencing even the loudest people. The room felt larger when I finally walked out, as if the walls themselves had shifted to make space for what came next. She had asked for mercy. I offered fairness. You said. The days that followed felt strangely quiet. Not the hollow quiet of emptiness, but a fuller kind, the kind that settles after a long storm finally breaks. Emails poured in. Congratulatory messages. Requests for collaboration. Reporters asking for statements I had no intention of giving. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. Everyone except the people who once told it without me. My phone buzzed constantly that first morning, until one notification appeared that stilled everything else. "Mother. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Her silence had always spoken louder than Elena's sharpness. She didn't need to insult me, she simply never intervened. A lifetime of passive agreement. A lifetime of choosing peace over fairness. We met in a small cafe near the old part of town. She arrived wrapped in her usual elegance, pearls perfectly settled against her collarbone, posture straight but eyes tired. She sat across from me with hands folded, like a child waiting to be scolded. For the first time, she looked smaller than I remembered. "I didn't know things were so bad," she said quietly. Her voice trembled, not dramatically, but in the way truth does when it finally shows itself. "You didn't ask," I replied. There was no venom in it. Just fact. She lowered her gaze, breath shuddering. "I failed you," she whispered. I let her overshadow everything. I let myself believe you didn't need me. "I needed you to see me," I said softly. A tear slipped down her cheek, not the kind that seeks pity, the kind born from recognition long overdue. She reached out, hesitated, then placed her hand over mine. "I see you now," she whispered. I didn't pull away. But I didn't pretend the past was erased either. Some truths don't heal, they settle. And settling can be enough. Later that afternoon, I received a message from my father as well. Short. Formal. Practically an apology written in the language of a man who never learned how. "Proud of your work. Should have paid more attention." It wasn't emotional. But it was honest. And sometimes honesty is more valuable than warmth. But Elena. She didn't message. Not that day. Not the next. I didn't expect her to. Her world wasn't just changing, it was rearranging itself around a truth she never prepared for. That the sister she once dismissed had quietly become the person capable of dismantling everything she took for granted. Still, I didn't celebrate. There was no satisfaction in watching her fall. Only a muted sense of balance, the kind you feel when a long-tilted scale finally returns to center. As MYRA settled into its new expansion, I found myself working late into the evenings. Not because I was running from anything, but because creation had always been the place where I found myself again. Building was my language. Silence was my ally. Consistency was my revenge. One night, as I locked up the office, I paused at the doorway and looked back. The space felt different now, brighter, steadier, expansive in a way that had nothing to do with square footage. It felt like a place where I belonged. Because I had built it. Not in spite of their doubt, but through it. Past it. Outside, the city hummed its usual restless song. Lights flickered. Cars passed. A breeze moved through the street, soft but certain. And in that moment, I understood something with a clarity that felt almost peaceful. Revenge had never been the point. Respect was. Self-respect most of all. I didn't need applause. I didn't need vindication. I didn't need them to rewrite the past. I had written my own future. Revenge wasn't what I wanted. Respect was. The rest came quietly. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest memories. Not erasing them, just taking the edge off until they stop cutting and start simply existing, like stones at the bottom of a river. Smooth. Heavy. Settled. Months passed. Myra grew, not explosively, but steadily, the kind of growth that lasts because it isn't built on spectacle. Meetings filled my days, strategy shaped my nights, and for the first time in my life, I moved through my work without feeling like I was walking through someone else's shadow. One crisp autumn evening, I found myself driving toward the old family estate, not intentionally, just letting the road lead where it wanted to. The house came into view like a memory rendered in stone, all warm lights and familiar silhouettes. It was strange standing in front of it again. Stranger still not feeling the weight I used to feel at the threshold. The door was slightly ajar. My mother had always hated shutting it fully, as if good things might suffocate without air. The hallway smelled the same, sandalwood, old books, something faintly floral. But the quiet was different. It wasn't tense. It wasn't expectant. It was empty. A house that once held too much noise now felt like it had finally exhaled. I walked through the rooms slowly, letting memories pass by like guests who no longer needed acknowledgement. The dining table where I'd been belittled so many times stood untouched, polished but unused. The chairs were tired. The walls seemed older. The chandelier, once blinding, felt dimmer. Everywhere I looked, I saw the ghosts of roles we had all been forced into. The pedestal they built for Elena. The quiet corner they pushed me into. The unspoken rules that shaped every conversation, every glance, every judgment. My footsteps echoed softly as I made my way to the window overlooking the garden. The night air pressed against the glass, cool and calm. Somewhere far off, a dog barked. Somewhere closer, a leaf scraped across stone. And then, from down the hallway, the faintest sound, the soft click of a door. Elena stepped into view. She looked different. Not defeated, not hardened, just human. The kind of human a lifetime of pretending never allowed her to be. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. There was no bitterness in her eyes. No resentment in mine. Just two people standing in the remnants of a story we had both survived in different ways. You built something real, she said quietly, hands clasped in front of her. Not jealous. Not bitter. Just true. So did you, I replied, meeting her gaze. For a while. Her laugh was small, almost fragile. I thought the name would be enough. I know. A pause. A breath. A tiny, reluctant smile. I'm trying to figure out who I am without it. I nodded. That's where the real work begins. She looked down, then back up, something almost like gratitude flickering in her expression. Not forgiveness. Not absolution. Just understanding. We didn't hug. We didn't apologize. Some relationships don't heal through words. Some simply shift into something gentler over time, like a wound that stops aching even though the scar remains. When I finally stepped back outside, the air felt lighter than when I'd arrived. The house stood behind me, still grand, still familiar, but no longer mine to fear, no longer mine to prove anything to. I walked toward the car with steady steps, the night cool on my skin, the future warm in my chest. The story that had shaped me was ending, not with drama, but with clarity. Not with triumph, but with truth. A truth that had taken years to grow roots inside me. Standing there beneath the quiet sky, I finally understood the shape of my own power, soft, steady, unshakable. The kind that doesn't need to be announced. The kind that simply exists. They once called me the quiet one. The dreamer. The afterthought. The one who would never matter. But silence, I learned, is not emptiness. It is potential. It is patience. It is the soil where entire futures take root. When I opened the car door, I took one last look at the estate behind me. Not with pain. Not with anger. Just with acceptance. Some stories begin in humiliation. Some grow in the dark. Some bloom in the places people forget to look. And some, like mine, are written so quietly that by the time the world hears them, they've already changed everything. They called me worthless once. Now silence carries my name. You said.